Hockey friends and families around the world, welcome to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias, as always, joined by Christy Casciano-Burns and Mike Benelli. And we have a very special guest today. We're joined by Roger Grillo, the New England Regional Manager for the USA Development Model. Roger is a longtime hockey player and coach, and he fell into his current role in 2009, right before things really got kicked off with the ADM in America. It went public at that point. And we're going to talk to Roger today about a bunch of stuff. But mainly, as we spoke about before, it is that time of year where tryouts and evaluations go on. And we really want to talk about the culture of hockey around this time, surrounding coaches, parents, and players. Because like most times during the year, this is a time you can really learn a lot about yourself. You can learn a lot about who you're going to be, about your team, what kind of parent you're going to be, what kind of coach you're going to be. It's very unveiling. So, Roger, I want to dive right into it. Our co-host here, Christy, interviewed you earlier the week. She gave me some notes. And one of the things that really stuck out to me, it's the first question, is that, and I love that you said this, you said, create a culture that embraces failure. This is one of the hardest concepts for people to jump into. It's also one of those concepts people go, yeah, no, I get that. But, my kid, this, my kid, that. But it is a tagline for anyone that has been successful, both in this country and abroad. So why don't you just dive into what that means for our audience first off, and we'll get the conversation going.
Yeah, I think it's probably as a parent, and certainly through youth sports, it's not easy to see your child struggle. It's not easy at all to see your child upset or hurt. And so our natural reaction is to protect that and cocoon them. And in the end of the day, I think if you really sat down and talked to anybody that's been successful in pretty much any walk of life, there was a lot of bumps in the road. There was a lot of failure through their journey, and it was how it was dealt with, not only by themselves, but by the people around them, that really kind of maybe dictated where they ended up. And I think in youth sports, and particularly in our sport of ice hockey, it's a game of mistakes, and it's managing the mistakes. And, you talk to players that played at a high level, they would always say to you that after a game, they probably think back and say, geez, I wish I had those 5 or 6 shifts over again. Right. And so the best players in the world fail consistently. And so for us as the keepers of the game, the adults, the coaches, the administrators, to really kind of embrace that culture, not only embrace it, but almost encourage failure in a safe, positive, productive manner is, in our minds, a big part of player development.
100%. And like you just said, embracing it, people always get quizzical when we use that word, right? Embrace it. But the truth is, it's as old as the adage of the hot oven, right? The hot stove. If you put your hand on a hot stove and you burn yourself, you're not going to do it again. Right. And let's just say there's a lot of hot stoves out there, where people can learn. One of the other quotes I have from Christy's research that I loved, and Christy, you can comment on this too, was that parents are racing to the wrong finish line. And it's not about being the best player, but being about the best 6-year-old, 12-year-old, 18-year-old.
Yeah.
I love that quote. Where'd you come up with that?
Well, we said it, and I think one of my coworkers, I think, came up with it at one point. And we see it all the time. And again, it's very normal for a parent, and a lot of our coaches are parent coaches. For the adults to want to have their kid be the best. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The challenge there is that there's no shortcut to long-term player development. And I'll never forget Mike Boyle, one of the top strength and conditioning people in certainly in our sport and in all the United States, longtime trainer with Boston University, worked with our women's Olympic team, the Boston Red Sox, so on and so on. He came up with the phrase, "You can't speed farm development," and I've used it all the time. I think it's a great saying. And part of it is that people are, you want your kid to be on the top team. You want your kid to be one of the top players. You want your kid to have success. But sometimes by really forcing that at a young age, the back side of that, or the other side of the coin of that, is burnout. Mm-hmm. And I try to get parents and coaches to always understand that at some stage, and it's usually like around that 13, 14-year-old range, we have to pass responsibility for development to the athlete. because now how you eat, how you train, what you do away from the rink, your strength training, your workout regimen, that's really going to be the deciding factor on where you go next.
Right.
But that takes a ton of passion. So if we're pushing those buttons down at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, is the athlete going to have the passion to work at it when it becomes most important? And I would say a lot of our kids don't, because we're trying to win that race to the wrong finish line. We're trying to develop the best 10-year-old, the best 12-year-old. And if you talk to players in any sport who play at the highest level and you ask them what their record was back when they were 10, 11, 12, I guarantee you they probably can't tell you. They can tell you some of the lumps, some of the positive, some of the fun, their buddies, their friends, but they don't know if they won or lost. They just enjoyed the sport. And passion is priority number one in sport.
Right. And also, Roger, what you mentioned is of course, you want your kids to be on the best team, but you also want them to have the best experience. And as you pointed out, if your kid's not in the top half of a team and they're on the bottom half, you got to step back and look, are they really going to have the best experience being on the bottom half of this team? That's something you really need to seriously consider too, as your kids start to move up.
Absolutely. And I think another really big pothole a lot of parents step into is that they think that competition drives development at a young age, that I have to have my kid playing against and with the best players in order for them to develop. And I always try to explain to them that there's a reason why there's no honors classes in elementary schools. And that's because all we're trying to do at the young age is build the base. We're just trying to give them the foundation of athleticism, of fun, of passion building, of the experience of being with their friends. And failure, as we talked about before, is a big part of that. But if I'm constantly chasing and I'm not touching the puck or scoring goals or feeling good about myself, my player development really gets plateaued. It really stagnates. And that's a huge mistake. There comes a point in player development where competition is important, but in our minds, that's up in the mid-teens and later on, where that other driving factor of playing with and against better players is a big part, but not when they're 10. It's a huge mistake. And if I'm a player, you think about that goaltender who's on a team that's so strong that they might get 5 shots a game. They're standing in the net the whole time. Like, are they really part of the game? Are they really experiencing the ability to overcome, I gave up a bad goal and my team lost? That's all part of player development. And sometimes we do such a poor job of allowing that to happen naturally that our kids struggle then when reality sets in when they get older.
It's a great point that you're bringing up. And, we love telling stories on this show. And one of the ones that I've been telling a lot this year is that I have always coached at an extremely high level. And this is the first year I'm ever doing atoms because my son's an atom,
Yep.
which is it's a completely different world at that level. And I acknowledged that the first day. I was like, look, if you want to know how to do like a 1-3-1 neutral zone trap, I'm your guy, but I'm not an atoms coach. So I really rely on the coach of the team. And, one of the things he told me early on that really was profound was he goes, like, there's really only one skill we need to teach at this level, skating. He goes, and we need to make that as fun as humanly possible for these kids so that it's not a bag skate every practice. And he has really taught me, and the other coaches too, the other dads, all these fundamental skating drills that I did not benefit from because when I was growing up, the current ADM wasn't in place yet. It was bag skate. So
Yep.
I love that. And, one of the things I tell my kids now is, especially early on, and I did this early on with whenever I've been doing learn to skate in the past or with this team, the first thing I say to the kids is, what is the first rule of skating, or what's the first rule of hockey? And I say the first rule is that it's okay to fall down. So echoing you, the first thing I tell these kids is it's okay to fail. It's completely normal. That's the first rule. I don't want you to be afraid to fall down. It's something I learned from watching the ADM. It's something I've learned from other coaches, but we start that early, right? You want to start that process really early. And Mike, you can comment on this too. Mike obviously is heavily involved in this, but we talk about that. Or I remember when I was an older player doing drills to failure, right? You do the drill until you fail, right? So that's the outcome, is to fail. The goal is to fail, right? Those were usually the most beneficial drills to me because not only did I learn my limit, but I learned how to push myself. I learned that I had to reach that point. It was forced failure, right? So just continuing along that line of thought, I think that especially like you said, under 12, which we're going to talk about 12 and up in a minute, just have fun, just enjoy the game. Like you said, you don't want the passion to burn away. I've seen that so often, man, where an 18-year-old who really has talent, potentially to go farther, just stops just because he's not enjoying it. Value system is on winning and not on love, right? The parents that you love them. Let's just keep going on that train of thought. I'm rambling now, but I thought that was fascinating when I learned to transition that.
Yeah, I think we could do an entire podcast on how to deliver skating
Right.
for our young athletes. I think what's happened, you know, in my generation, it was power skating. Like you know, we're gonna do our 20 to 30 minutes of power. We're gonna do the non-fun stuff at the start of practice so that you can do the fun stuff at the end of practice. I mean, think about that mentality. Think about as a salesperson or as a teacher to motivate young kids. You're going to tell them we're going to do non-fun stuff for 20 to 30 minutes so that we can get to the fun stuff. So they completely disengage. They completely emotionally, mentally shut down. And player development completely stops. And yet we think we're delivering this high-end, you know, great development model. And I just always use the phrase Flintstone vitamins. I mean, there's a reason why Flintstone vitamins is still in business. They figured out how to deliver something really good for kids that doesn't taste like, you know, something that's healthy, right? It tastes like, and so can we not deliver, which is something really important in skating, can we not deliver that in a fun, entertaining, productive manner? And I would say absolutely yes. And absolutely we have to. If we don't, we're really not developing hockey players. We're just developing robots. And that's a huge, huge mistake that I think a lot of people are making with our young athletes. And I would tell you also, having coached college hockey for a long time, you got to make it fun for those guys too. And I'll tell you what, the pro coaches today, you've got to find a way to entertain those guys to get them to kind of really buy in and take that next level of engagement and intensity and focus. You got to almost trick them into it.
Yeah, it's about attacking it on a human level, and like you said, not a robotic level. Not to get a deep cut here. And Mike, I am going to transition. Mike's been very patient today on this episode, not speaking yet. But you know, it's funny when you look at like the Soviet Union, right, and the way they trained basically robots. I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying that. You know, the joke is they never smiled, right? But when they had Anatoly Tarasov as their coach, he had an understanding of this on making it fun. And it was funny because that ended up almost undoing him in a lot of ways within his own country. For those of you who follow kind of, you know, old school global hockey, Anatoly Tarasov, not only did he, you know, really become the godfather of off-ice training and development, but he really loved his players. And when they moved him out of that system in the Soviet Union in the early 80s, the program started to suffer, right? And not just because of the downfall of the Soviet Union. I mean, and they did create great hockey players, but if you watch any documentary about the Red Army or those teams, you're hard pressed to find someone that they're all very patriotic, but you're hard pressed to find someone who goes, I really loved going to practice with my teammates. I mean, the stories are I missed my father's death because I had to be at practice, right? So we don't want to emulate that here, right? I mean, you take what you can learn from those development models, but I agree with you 100%. Now, Mike, I got to turn to you. I got to give you a chance to talk. I feel bad that I haven't done that yet, but Mike, you're also heavily involved in this world, right? I'm sure you have like 6 comments already piled up that you want to say. So I'm not going to even ask a question, Mike. I'm just going to let you talk.
Yeah, no. Well, listen, I'm on the disciple of the Roger Grillo tree. I mean, I think what Roger's done with USA Hockey in the past, you know, let's just say 10 years, just for a time frame, about where we were and the way we taught, right? I mean, everything that I try to do is just continually educating myself as a coach to listen to the best coaches that have gone out there and not only done the research, but got dirty in this. Like actually, you know, so Roger, I guess my question to you is, how can we educate and influence coaches to understand that the 12U, 10U, my hockey rankings world, the lonely D in the cross ice 3-on-3 where the D has to be in a triangle formation, and that, you know, what can we do as parents for our kids to educate ourselves about, you know, other than, you know, seeing some USA Hockey stuff, but what can we do as parents to help just educate ourselves and feel good about what the rest of the world is doing, and how not only is USA Hockey leading that, but USA Hockey has done the research and the facts, right, that give us this the story that's being told through the American development model.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's constant discussions like this, right? It's constantly getting just stories and talking about it. And really, at the end of the day, I think for most people, when you do sit down and talk about it, it's almost like common sense kind of hits you right in the face, right? It's just like, well, that makes sense. Like I tell coaches all the time, like, back in my generation, we could go in and we could do some team structure and we could do some of that stuff, but we had 20 to 30 hours of outdoor ice in our back pocket. And that's where we developed. That's where we became players. It wasn't the inside stuff. That was just the extra. Where we really developed was on the pond. And Lee, you mentioned the Russians. If you talk to Larionov and those guys, they'll tell you that in between apartment complexes, they played a ton of unstructured play, and that's where they developed their game. And then they went inside and got a little bit more structure and discipline and all that other stuff. But really at the base of the foundation was just to play. And I tell coaches all the time, when you go to the outdoor rink, you go to the pond, you go to your backyard rink, do you go out there without pucks? Do you go out there and just do edge work for 20 minutes to an hour when it's 20 degrees outside? And I know growing up that if we lost the puck in the snowbank, or just it disappeared, because that's what happens to them, or somehow it's almost like socks in a dryer. We'd figure out a tape ball, we figured out a chunk of ice, or we went home. We didn't start doing edge work. We didn't start working on our stride, right? Because that's not fun. It's important. We were getting that work through the game. We were getting our repetitions through the competition, through the fun. But can we not look at what really allowed my generation and generations before to really truly develop? Can we not take those components and then put them into the modern world today? There's some things that happened back then that we would never want to add to now. I tell the coach all the time, I'm not going to a dentist that uses 30-year-old techniques and tools. I'm just not going to do it. So why am I going to go to a coach that uses 30-year-old techniques and tools? I'm not going to do it. It's just not common sense.
Right.
We got to modernize things, but we can't lose sight of what the most important aspect of it, and that is having fun and developing players.
Right. I think this year, especially in the real hockey pause, right, that you got to see all the outdoor rinks and the pop-up rinks in the backyards. And I joke all the time, like, I've never seen a group of kids go to a pond, and this year was the best. I mean, it was one of the best years ever, for free play and just exploring the game, right? And I have yet to see 4 kids go out in a pond and shovel off an NHL size ice rink, right? They just shovel off just enough so they can play and they can have fun and touch the puck. And then we get on the ice and we throw these kids on this 17,000 square feet of ice, and we think we have to use it all, or we're losing development. And it is a like a light bulb moment that when you watch children play, and we talk about this a lot on this podcast about the need for it's so crazy that we have to actually structure free time for kids, because we've taken it all away from them. And I think I think certainly the American development model has given the blueprint to that, but I think we're still a long way away from really implementing it and seeing where parents aren't getting. We had a skate last night. We had 15 kids showed up, and I just threw a couple pucks out and said, "You guys figure your team out, and then have at it." And they're like, "Well, aren't we gonna, like, do you want us to do some warm-up drills, or do you want to?" I go, "No, just go play. Don't worry about it." And looking up at mom and dad, like, I don't know if is this worth me being here? And it's just an odd occurrence that this has happened, where the kids don't know how to have free play.
Yeah,
we've kind of taken that away from them.
And they can learn some great lessons by just having fun without even realizing that they're like, I'm going back to when my kids were really little. And the first time they were out on the ice, the way I taught them how to skate, I got Mr. Bubble out. and I would blow bubbles on the ice and tell them, okay, go pop the bubbles.
Yeah.
Now that was fun for them. Did I say, now make sure your edge is this way and do your crossover? They just went out and had fun popping bubbles. And by the end of the day, they were skating. So when you make it fun for them, they're learning all the skills without making it feel like it's so instructional and boring. So, there's a lot of ways you can weave fun into lessons. But what I wanted to talk about too, guys, is when we're getting back to cuts and how to handle it. It's really tough on you as a parent as well as your kid. So I want to talk a little bit about how to handle it as a parent. And one of the things Roger pointed out, which fortunately we're on the same page here, is you don't want to get emotional after when you find out your kid just got cut. Try not to show that. When my daughter got cut from a AAA team first time, she had, oh my gosh, the tears flowed. And I wanted to cry too, but I didn't let her show how much it hurt me too that she didn't make it, because I watched her work so hard and I thought she was ready and she didn't make it. I was crying on the inside, but not on the outside. Just stay calm and tell them it's going to be okay. Take a step back. Sophia, what do we need to work on? Do you want to continue this? If you do, we'll look for a team that's more suitable for where you're at now and work hard. And if she had the passion and wanted to do that and was willing to work hard, then we'd go for it. But Roger, as you pointed out, being more even-keeled as a sport parent is really important.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. My son played college baseball and he was a relief pitcher. So there's only two things that can happen. It's either going to be good or it's going to be bad. There's no you did okay today, because you either got the outs or you didn't get the outs, and it's really cut and dry. It's almost like being a goaltender's parent in a shootout, right? It's either going in or it didn't go in. There's only two outcomes. And so to get in those high moments and those low moments as you're watching or being involved in your child's journey, it's really can be difficult. But if you don't manage it well, it just adds another layer of stress on top of the athlete. And being around some great hockey or sports parents in my tenure, guys that I coached, they never got too high. They never got too on the inside. They were hurt, but there was always a smile. It was always, it's okay. And I'm going to be there for you to support you. And, it has nothing to do with what I think of you. And you're going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. And I think one of the mistakes that's made is I think people think like the American development model is anti-competition, anti-winning. We would say, no, every time you step on the ice, you're trying to win. Just don't look for the shortcuts to get there.
Right.
Because the shortcuts are what become the negative, right? And then same thing with moms and dad. It's okay to want your kid to be good. It's okay to want your kid to win and win championships. That's perfectly normal. But how we handle it when it doesn't happen is really important.
And Mike, have you seen parents really lose it when their kids get cut from a team?
It gets so emotional. I mean, and in today's sport, if you got cut from the yellow Bruin team, when you were 8 in house league, it didn't seem like it was the end of the world, right? I mean, that's like the world I grew up in, where you had a lot of chances to get cut or moved or didn't make a particular group. But now it's to Roger's analogy, it's either you're on or you're off. Like there's not a lot of options for parents. And then it becomes, okay, I'm so mad that my kid should have made this team. I'm now going to leave and go to another organization that has the same amount of letters, but they have a space for me. And I think it certainly diminishes it for the kid, but I think it diminishes it for all of us for hockey, right? Because it's just diluting what we feel is an accomplishment. And I think, but we as organizations, right, as hockey people, we just have to find better ways to have more levels of good experiences, so that when there is a kid cut, that there's a reason for it, there's a solution, and then there's a goal to get them back to a place where maybe they could play at that higher level.
I want to jump in here, because one of the things I love to do on our show is to provide solutions or gateways for parents, coaches, and players to start to go down this path. One of the quotes that's been getting a lot of runs lately, but in a different way, was we all know Michael Jordan didn't make his high school basketball team. And what I've noticed is, when I was young, it was like, he didn't make it. He tried hard and he made it. Right. And now that quote is turning a bit to he didn't make it. His mother then, and this is the important part, his mother said, well, that's too bad. Work harder, basically. Maybe not that harsh. And then he started working hard to make it. His mother had that impact. And I'm sure his father too. Right. So that quote's kind of turned to not just, oh, Michael Jordan overcame the odds. The quote is like, he had good parents that didn't just let him cry about it. They told him to get up. Now, we're talking about being even keeled. We're talking about, mentality. And this is what I want to bring up, because there is things you can do, right? And when I work with teams, especially in the group setting, we talk about being even keeled. And the question is, how do I do that? Well, to Roger's point, to Christy's point, and Mike, to your point, those moments of devastation or even elation, it goes both ways. You can work on right then. You shouldn't be focused on I didn't make the team. You should actually be focused on the emotion, the devastation. Acknowledge that emotion, right? Because this is how you learn to get even keeled. A lot of people don't acknowledge their emotions. You get the hockey fan that throws something at his TV when his team loses. What do we teach in our kids? You have no control over that game, right? So my philosophies with this, or I try and keep it really simple, is one is only focus on the things that you control. Number one. Number two is live in the present moment as much as you possibly can, right? Now, let's just take getting cut from a team. Mike, that your example, I wanted to play on this team. I didn't get on the team. Christy, you said this. As a parent, you will be devastated for your kid. If they hurt, you hurt. That's the first thing you got to acknowledge, right? The second thing you have to acknowledge, and maybe talk to your kid about this, is what are you feeling right now when they're ready to talk? Obviously, right after the moment is probably not the best time to do this, but what are you feeling? I'm feeling devastated. I'm feeling like they kicked me off the team. I'm feeling this. Okay, let's explore those emotions for a moment, right? A lot of times we get parents like, no, be hard, be hard. Well, if we don't teach them how to deal with that, if they don't know what that emotion is, how can we expect them to be hard? You're telling them to bury it. What happens when you bury things? They explode. Burnout. Massive, massive problems, right? So it's all about acknowledging the emotion and learning how to deal with that emotion. Same thing when you win, right? It's a good feeling, but if you stay up there too long, you're going to eventually come down, right? So Roger, I didn't know if you wanted to comment on that, but it's just a lot of that emotional stuff that people didn't want to talk about. It's very important to helping teach someone to be even keeled.
Yeah, and it's not easy. I mean, it's great in theory and stuff, but when you're living through the moment, and it's just human nature to protect your child. I mean, it's
Right.
You stick your hand in the bear's den, you're probably going to get bit or attacked. So, I think being a parent brings along some just natural reactions, and I think when it comes to, I think handling youth sports and failure in youth sport is a really important thing, because there's going to be bigger fish to fry,
right,
in a child's life than not making a team. There's going to be bigger moments that are going to be way more important than that. And so, I think I'll always feel for the coaches that coach their own kids for a long period of time, because I always try to explain to them, like, there's going to come a moment where you're going to need to be dad or mom, and it's not about the forecheck, it's not about a penalty you took, it's about some really tough stuff,
right.
and you want them to really dial in on you and not think, oh, it's coach talking again. And so to step back sometimes, and not be as involved as we all want to be, is probably a pretty healthy move at some point.
It brings me actually into the next question. We talked about the trade-off at 12, 13, 14 from kind of parenting to letting the kid find their own way. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this. So here's the thing. A lot of parents feel, or some parents feel like, hey, my kid's going to make it, or my kid's going all the way. And I don't want to be ever the bad guy that's like, look, nobody makes. I hate when people say that. The truth is, your kid might very well go all the way. We don't know, right? But at that trade-off point, what are some of the tricks, or what are some of the tips you can give parents, whether the kid's going all the way or not? Like, I'm not negating either side of that, to assist the parent in that handoff, right? Because it's really hard. It's really hard for a parent to just kind of, I don't want to say fully let go, but stand back, right? And say, hey, If you want to do it, you'll do it. I've told the story on this podcast many times how when I was that age, my father said to me, if you want to make it, you'll go out there and practice on your own. And that was the click for me. He said it right to my face, and I never had to ask him again to help me practice. I just did it. So what are the tips that you have for parents to recognize that maybe they're not letting go, and then how to let go from that point?
Well, I think if mom or dad are the reason why the kid's working, then it's a false foundation, and it's going to crumble.
Right.
I think for parents, once they get to that certain age, you're really there just as a support. You're there to drive them. You're there to, maybe help financially to pay for some things. You're there to watch and cheer. But really the work and the desire to work and the drive has to purely come from the athlete. And the athlete needs to want it a lot more than mom or dad want it. And that's, sometimes you just don't see that with the older athletes, because in a lot of cases, it was a false foundation to begin with early on. And I get parents of young players all the time ask me, listen, my kid doesn't want to go to the rink. And I said, well, don't go to the rink. It's pretty simple.
Well, I spend a lot of money on this.
It's pretty simple, but I paid all this money. I go, yeah, but like it's a sport. It's not school. It's not mandatory. It's not something that's that really at the end of the day that important. And find something they do want to do, that they are excited about doing. I always tell the story. There's something you brought up, Lee, that I'd like to comment on too. That is that it drives me nuts when people throw out the stats of your kid only has a 1% chance of going to play college hockey.
Yeah.
I hate that because that's the child's dream. And I would never, ever, ever say to a kid, you can't become a great musician. You can't become a great doctor. You can't become the smartest person on the planet. You can go do whatever you want to do. What's your drive? What's your passion? And sometimes we suck the life out of them by telling them they can't do it.
Yeah, I hate that. I don't understand.
Imagine going to class and the teacher's like, listen, you'll never be an engineer. It's impossible for you. Right. And I'm like, well, why would you? I'm 8 and I love Legos and I like to do these things, but I think it's so crazy. Hey, Roger, I had a question. So the parent side, I get it, right? That we have to do a better job of preparing our kids. What can we do as coaches? And I'm a parent coach. And I always try to preface this. I always get calls from, especially this time of year, tryouts. Oh, I'm looking to leave my organization, Mike, and we'd like to come over and try out for your team. And I go, what's the problem with the team? He goes, oh, it's parent coaching. I go, well, just to let you know, we have 4 parent coaches. I said, but I think it's all how you use that parent coaching moniker, right? But what can we do as organizations and coaches and people that are making these cuts? Like, what can we do to make that experience a better experience for the family and the kids?
Yeah, I think it's I think the reality of it is you're going to have parent coaches. I think, and that's perfectly okay. I think it's absolutely normal and perfectly okay. And there's some that handle that very well, and there's some that I mean, I remember when I did finally get to coach my own son, my wife was like, how come Dominic never gets to start? I was trying to prove I wasn't going to be that bad hockey parent, right? So my own kid almost got the shorter end of the stick. And I have friends that are like that too, and we talk about it all the time. We try to go the other way. So there's a other side of that story that's just as detrimental as taking too much care of your own kid, right?
I got home the other day and my wife had to watch the game on Live Bar, and she goes, well, how come Michael doesn't get as much ice time as the other defensemen? I'm like, whoa, we got a 24-hour rule here. I said, you got to wait on this. Exactly. You're just watching your own kid, I think.
So I think at some point it's really important that they hear another voice. So whether it's one of the other coaches, if you're trying to be, constructively criticize or coach them up or whatever, tell them some things. It's never a bad thing to have another voice, because I think at some point you're going to have discussions with your child about, their health, their schooling, their behavior, the social interaction. I mean, how they use their cell phone today. I mean, there's so many other discussions that are going to be so much more important than, what they did on the penalty kill. So I think it's important that you don't treat them unfairly either way,
Right.
too positive, too negative, but that once in a while you have somebody else talk to them about the hockey stuff, so that you can just be dad or mom. And really hard thing is in the car ride home is go right to something besides what just happened. Even if it was a positive, just move on to something else. Cause the kids do. The kids move on to stuff way quicker than we do. And it's hard. Like I look back at myself and I made some mistakes for sure. It's really hard because you know what your child wants, how passionate they are about it, and you want to fix it for them. And we can't. We can guide them, but we can't fix it. That's their responsibility, especially as they get older.
It goes back to what you said too. Like, I had this great coach tell me as a coach this advice. He goes, coaches are always tough about following their own advice. And the thing is, as coaches, we fail too, and we have to embrace the failure as well to learn. But, it's funny, we give out a lot of advice. Sometimes we don't follow our own advice. Another point, Roger, I wanted to bring up too. Sometimes adults forget how to be kids or forget what it was like to be a kid. We talked about free play. And I still play quite a bit. And don't get me wrong, I love the competition aspect of playing in an adult league. I really do. But I still love to play open hockey. And why? Because the same reasons the kids do. There's no refs, there's no score being kept. I can just go out there and have fun. It doesn't matter if I get scored on. So that kid still really does live in us as adults. We just kind of forget, or it transitions into something else, or it becomes like a locker room talk type mentality. But the truth is that it never really goes away. We just kind of forget. So kids are also a gateway for us to learn about ourselves a little bit too. And then another thing you both brought up that's funny. I remember I was watching my kid's only 7. And I'll say this is going to sound kind of funny, but he's pretty good at cutting down angles for some reason. I don't go into it any farther than that. I just noticed that. And I was talking to the head coach of my team, again, coaching moment for me. I said, yeah, he's really good at that. Like maybe he's going to be a defenseman. And he says to me, yeah, he's a defenseman this year. He's an offenseman last year, next year, he's just like, he's 7. And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. I'm not going to bring up him cutting off the angles. He'll just do what he does. But yeah, I know I'm always amazed by these conversations because, and again, what you said, I've said this quote many times on the show about, coaches who say things like, you'll never make it. What's the point? Or we know, I was told this, it's that as an adult, you don't have to support the dream that someone has, but you need to support their right to have a dream. Right. So if your kid wants to be an NHL superstar, you might know in your head that might not happen, but you need to support their right to have that dream, because from that dream, it's like a flower will bloom other things, the possibility of becoming whatever they want to be when they grow up, or the possibility of knowing, hey, maybe I can try this entrepreneurship. I mean, there's so many roads that this could lead to, sports, hockey in our case, it's a vehicle for growth as a human being, more than just being for growth as a hockey player. You said earlier, I want to transition this a little bit. You said earlier that there are people that say that, well, the U.S. development model doesn't breed competition. Well, the statistics do not show that whatsoever. We've had more World Junior wins since this was introduced. We've had more players make the NHL since this was introduced. We've had more high-level hockey since this was introduced. There's nothing to actually prove the opposite, that it's actually done anything bad. It's done nothing but good for USA Hockey. And you've been in that development model really since it launched about 20 plus years ago. And it's changed the experience for everybody from Atom up. That's the other thing. We talked about that earlier in the show, where even from the Atom level, it's all about having fun, right? So what has that experience been like watching this develop? It's still developing all the time, which is the genius of it. And what can we expect moving forward with the ADM?
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting journey. It's I think at first it was all about selling, trying to get people just to buy in, like this works. And now I think we're at the phase where we still have to sell new parents. Certainly, there's always new people coming into the sport, and we always got to keep our eye on the ball with that. But now we've seen some huge. It seems like it's taken forever. It seems like there hasn't been a lot of big change. But if you really, really dig deep, it's been change in anything is not easy. And when you're talking about dramatic change, going from full ice to cross ice or half ice, checking, full body checking out of 12 and under, and moving it up a group. I mean, we've done some things that taking icing out of penalty kill and for youth hockey. I mean, think about that. Think about some of the stuff that we allowed to happen that's just so anti-player development.
Right.
So it's been a blast. And the beauty of it is, as you mentioned, Lee, it works. Like it's not just theory and philosophy. This stuff really, really works. It's way more enjoyable once you do embrace it for the coaches, the parents, and the athletes. And the impact is dramatic. And I think where we're going to be moving next is just helping people implement it cleaner. I always use the analogy spinal tap. Like, I'm going to come watch your practice and your amp might go to 8. It's a pretty good practice, but how are we going to get your amp to go to 11? Right? Because if we can really maximize player development opportunities for our kids in our training because of the lack of unstructured play, then that's a game changer. If we can get people to embrace the training model,
right,
and kind of tamper down the competition model, we're going to develop a lot more well-balanced athletes. Because right now the competition, the biggest disappointment for me during COVID was I thought because kids couldn't travel around and play all these games that people would embrace practice more. And it happened a little bit. And Mike made a great point about the backyard rink and more outdoor unstructured. That was a huge plus. But what I really noticed was there was so much angst because they couldn't play their games and they couldn't go play against this team and they couldn't travel up to Boston and they couldn't do this and that. And it was a little disheartening, but it opened our eyes to something that we already knew. And that is that competition is king. And we have to understand that, but we have to make sure that practice and training is the priority, that for the adults, that how we attack the training and embrace the training as parents and coaches and administrators is going to be the deciding factor on how well our athletes do as they move forward.
Right. And parents should not get swept into, as we said at the top of the show, your kid has to play at the highest level, be with the best to be the best. Every kid develops at a different pace.
Right,
and we saw that with our own daughter. I mentioned earlier, she got cut from that AAA team. So she played house for another year. A house team actually allowed her to touch the puck a lot more, get very creative. It built her confidence. And she finally, as the one coach said, unleashed the Kraken. She developed this incredible shot. So good. So she made the high school team. They won a state championship. And early on, when she didn't make that AAA team, parents were saying, oh, she's never going to play college hockey. That's it. If she didn't make the team at this age 13, forget about your dream of playing college hockey. But she never did, because she had a love for the game, a willingness to figure out how to overcome that adversity and an injury. She had a meniscus tear and she was on crutches for months, but that didn't stop her because she has such a passion and a love for the game. Yeah. She's now playing college hockey. When age 13, all the naysayers said it would never happen. So don't underestimate your kids either. Support them in their dream, be there for them, and let them figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, we think we know, we don't know. I always have a story I tell about, evaluating somebody's talent at different stages. And my father had a pretty famous rock and roll band in 1958, and he was a junior in high school, and they toured the country. They had #1 song in the country, and they were killing it. And their classmate, one year ahead of them, wanted to join the band, so they had him come over, and he wanted to play keyboards and piano. And they had a little tryout in my grandparents' basement. And they said, no, you're not good enough. There's no chance you're gonna ruin whatever we got going positively. You're gonna take us the other way. Well, that young man changed his name from Robert Zimmerman to Bob Dylan about 3 years later, went on to win a Nobel Peace Prize for literature and to set the world on fire with music. So just a word of the wise to all the adults out there that are doing all these evaluating and deciding who's got talent, who doesn't. We don't know. We don't know what's on the
Thank you
inside.
for that. That's a great story.
So,
Roger, I'm not
I
gonna lie to
don't
you.
let my dad forget that very often, by the way.
That's a great story.
Roger, I'm not gonna lie to you.
It changed my life too.
I had another story lined up, but it's not gonna top that, so I'm not gonna tell it.
Yeah. Leave
But
it
I was gonna say, I think that's actually a good place to move on. But I was gonna say, Christy or Mike, do you have any other questions before we close this out? Because that's a phenomenal story.
That's the best way to end this block here. That was
Right.
great.
Right.
Not
We
gonna
should play a
top.
little Dylan, a little Bob Dylan.
Yeah,
exactly.
We'll get that on the copyright on the way out. We'll make sure our producer comes on that. No, but Roger, that is a
Yeah.
great way to end the episode. I wanted to make sure that. But we really appreciate you coming on here today. We hope to have you back in the future. It's invaluable advice, and for those of you listening at home, we hope you found it valuable as well. But Roger, again, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun, and all the best to everybody.
And
Yeah,
that
thanks,
brings
Roger.
us
Thank
to this
you.
point. If you enjoyed this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey, we got a lot of them now. We're well over 20. Check us out on ourkidsplayhockey.com for all of them, or you can listen to us wherever podcasts are out there, or you can watch us on YouTube or Facebook. Pretty much just search Our Kids Play Hockey and you'll find us. So for Christy Casciano-Burns, Mike Benelli, and Roger Grillo, I'm Lee Elias. Thank you so much for watching this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we will see you next week. Have a great day, everyone.